Okay. Well, it's good to be back, such as my voice is, and we will try to get through as much of this as we can today. Let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thanks so much for the day today. Lord, we just pray that you will watch over us this week and give us strength and wisdom and understanding about what we should do and how we should act in today's world. Pray bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I appreciate all the cards, letters, phone calls. I know we received well over probably 1,000 phone calls and emails and messages saying, where are you? What happened to you? Did you get banned from YouTube? And the answer is no. Pam and I both had some pretty bad sinus infections, and that sort of transitioned into laryngitis for me. I sort of sounded like the love child of Rod Stewart and Kim Carnes with laryngitis on top of it. So it was hard a few days ago, talking and trying to make a sound to come out was sort of a 50-50 proposition. So things seem to have helped. Probably see me sipping on orange juice like crazy today because that seems to help more than anything. So we're going to talk about transitions, and I've had a lot of things that I've wanted to talk about over the last 3 weeks since I spoke last. And I have to tell you that the other morning I actually got up and I said, thank you, Lord, for taking away my voice for a couple of weeks so I didn't have to weigh in on all of this nonsense that was going on in the world. Unfortunately, I got my voice back, so I don't know if that's a sign. So this is going to be sort of, at least initially, our 2021 symbol as we go through some pretty serious transitions. We talk about the convergence of events, the disrupted world that we live in, a reminder that we're on different platforms, Rumble, Real FBC. Rumble's kind of hard to find. You have to kind of really look for it. We'll try to put a link in the YouTube description. I have a number of course, we're on YouTube, Fellowship Bible Chapel, or my name, John Haller. Christian Sentinel, Blog Talk Radio does the audio podcast, and then Remnant Truth Network, rtntv.org, also puts up the update. And I don't know, I haven't figured out what the algorithm is that gets you banned from YouTube. I see a lot of my friends who do prophecy updates. Some are still up and some are not. Some are a little bit more direct in talking about some of the more controversial issues, and they're gone. Their stuff lasts on YouTube for maybe an hour or two, and it's gone. So I'm not trying to avoid anything. I do have some opinions about some things that I may express today that may offend you. And if I don't offend you, stick around a few weeks, and I probably will. It has been a very difficult couple of weeks. And I don't know if people send me videos and articles and all of these things, if they want me to vet them and they want my opinion on them, or they're trying to educate me. They think I'm, as somebody told me the other day, you're low information, John. You don't understand what's going on. And you need to do a little bit more research. And part of that was because, and so I'll just sort of start out. I have received, and this is not an exaggeration, I went several days where I received, through YouTube Messenger, not YouTube Messenger, Facebook Messenger, a video every 1 to 2 minutes, 24/7 for a week. Thousands of videos. A lot of them I would put them into the category of conspiracy theory, and so I'll just make a couple of comments. Folks, listen, in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus warned us what was going to happen at the end. And the big thing was, take heed that no man deceive you by any means. Now, he mentioned that 4 times in the Olivet Discourse. He mentioned it 4 times more than he mentioned anything else that he warned about. So I kind of take that as a pretty serious warning from the Lord to us that deception is going to run rampant in the last days. And I think what you've seen over the last 2 weeks is you have seen deception on so many different levels. I've never seen anything like it. I do consider myself to be pretty well informed. I read dozens of articles and technical articles on vaccines and science and what's going on with the virus and that type of thing, in addition to geopolitics. So I consider myself to be pretty well informed. And I have to tell you that as I'm looking at things over the past 2 weeks, week and a half, it is extremely difficult to figure out what the truth is. And I think we need to be patient with others, but I also think that every one of you Christians bears a responsibility, rather than just forwarding videos to 25, 50, 100, 1,000 people, that you actually take the time and try to vet the information that's in that video. This is respect my time a little bit. I try hard to get to the truth and to drill down. But when my messenger is popping off every minute or 2 minutes, that's with videos. That doesn't include all the other stuff. It's impossible for me to keep up. So I do vet some of the videos. And I also want to say this. If I push back against a nonsensical video that you send me, don't be offended. Be grateful that I took the time to respond to you. So I'll give you an example. And look, I love people. I don't mind that you send me stuff, okay? But I'm just telling you, at some point, I'm human and I'm going to pop off and I'm going to tell you, this is nonsense. Go get a life and figure out what the truth is. So I will give you an example, and I've talked about this a number of times. There's a video that's going around. It's supposedly Bill Gates doing a secret briefing at the Pentagon. Now, I have talked about this 2 or 3 times in the past, have I not? And what I have told you is that video is fake. First of all, a 4-year-old could figure out that that's not Bill Gates in the video. A 5-year-old could figure out the way the video is formatted, it's not 15 years old like it claims to be in the video, because it's formatted in a widescreen thing. And vet it. Google it, and you'll find that the video is debunked. Supposedly what the video is Bill Gates saying, we're developing a vaccine to give people to change their God gene. That's to get rid of the fundamentalist God, that people believe in Islamic fundamentalism because of the God gene. And so we're going to give them a vaccine, and that will remove their ability to believe in God. Now listen, folks, I'm telling you that everybody believes this, that this is true. And now it's on, you add on top of it what everybody thinks about the vaccine, about it changing your genetic makeup and your genetic DNA. I am telling you that if you think that the God of the universe, who created every one of you, created you with a gene that somebody could plunge a needle into your arm and remove your ability to believe in God, you don't have a science problem, you have a theological problem. You need to go reacquaint yourself with the God of the Bible, because that is not how the God of the Bible works. And I will say, that is not how the mark of the beast is going to work. And there's a lot of nonsense floating around out there from Christian teachers about this vaccine being the mark of the beast. This is unbiblical, this is nonsense, and they have a massive theological problem, in my opinion. Now, get this straight. That does not mean that I approve of this vaccine. Is that understandable to you? There are tons of reasons not to like this vaccine, not the least of which you can read report after report of pretty severe reactions. People saying, well, it's not going to really make you immune anyway. And now, but here's the reality, okay? We can get up there and people who have a job in a church, they don't live in the real world. And the real world thing is, you are going to have to make a decision in many cases. I know this is coming in my law firm. It's coming, and you can go read, we're advising clients about what to do. Can you require that somebody to get the vaccine? And the answer is yes. And so people are going to have to make a decision whether they want to work or not, as to they're going to have to get the vaccine. If you're going to want to travel, you're probably going to have to get the vaccine. And I think we're at a stage where we need to wrestle with, there are some deep theological issues involved, but we also need to be careful that we don't get so focused on the fact that we want to bring the end time and we want Jesus to come back right now, that we turn everything into the last crisis before Jesus returns. Do you understand what I'm saying? We make everything imminent. So the vaccine, that's the mark of the beast. A Hezbollah, Syrians-backed Hezbollah commander sneezes in southern Syria, and that means Ezekiel 38 is going to happen tomorrow. This is, just back off a little bit. Listen, I believe all this stuff is going to happen. In fact, I know it's going to happen, but we can't make everything imminent like it's happening tomorrow, because it gets into a lot of hype. So the Gates video is bogus. Don't forward it on to anybody. It's nonsense. Some guy made it up to support a theory that he had. There's never been a scientific proof that there's a God gene anyway. And I think there's a theological problem more than that. And when the mark of the beast comes, it involves the worship of the beast. As it has, whether you can buy or sell implications to it, but there's a whole lot more going on there. And so we need to be careful, and we need to sort of dial back the hype. Just my advice. And so, the other thing that I'm getting are, goodness gracious, hundreds of videos about they're taking down the deep state. The indictments are going to be, people are being arrested. People are actually being arrested right now as we sit here, and they're filling up Gitmo and ships off the coast. Folks, I would encourage you to get a grip on reality. If that stuff was happening, it would be readily apparent. And please don't send me these lists of indictments. There's a database that somebody's made up. The whole thing is flawed. The search is flawed, and it gives false positives. So when that number of those indictments was 3,000 3 years ago, I said it was nonsense, fake, and made up. That there were not 3,000 indictments in the federal system that were just being ready to be sprung on people. Now the number is 231,000, and people believe it more than they did when it was 3,000. So let me just, 1 minute to do this. And I've been involved in criminal cases, white-collar cases, so I know how the system works. Federal criminal indictments, by and large, particularly of the type that people are talking about, are very complex things to put together. You will have to convene grand juries in every district That's 23 people that will be sitting in a room hearing evidence. You will have, for example, the one case that I'm really familiar with, from the time that the financial scandal was discovered until the indictments came down, and there were about 13 people indicted, that took 3.5 years. Everybody in town knew that they were investigating this because they were dragging people in front of grand juries, they were dragging people to FBI interviews, and lawyers talk. And lawyers, hey, you know, are you representing anybody in connection with this investigation? There were 50 federal agents working on it full time. This is for one indictment against 7 people. 50 agents, 4 or 5 U.S. attorneys. Now multiply that by 200,000. It's not physically possible. It is completely bogus and made up. I know you want bad people to go to jail. I know you want bad people to be punished for the crimes that they've done. I do too. I'm just telling you, I've been hearing this for 3.5 years, and now I'm hearing it even more the last few days as Trump is transitioning out of office. And then the other videos are that Trump's not leaving. Trump's staying, martial law is going to be declared, everything's going to be okay, and we're going to wake up on January 21st in a great, wonderful paradise known as America. And so look, in 4 days, if that happens to be true, great. But I also live in a real world. I live in a real world where my office building and buildings downtown are all shut down for the next 3 or 4 days in Columbus, Ohio, in government buildings all over the state. Now, I don't know if there's going to be any problems. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. But I also know there are a lot of people that said Trump was a lock for a second term. And right now, that's not looking too good. And there's got to be some people, if January 21st comes and Trump is not president, there needs to be some serious, 2 things. There needs to be some serious repentance by people who are demonstrably false prophets, and there needs to be people holding them accountable, and don't pay attention to them ever again, because they've shown that they're not true. And let me just sort of give you my view. We can argue about the gift of prophecy and whether it is for today and current. I cannot exclude that from a powerful God, that he would allow people to do things, but it always needs to line up with Scripture. And the scriptural principle, though, is, first of all, Jesus warning against deception. And also, like, you look at stories in the Old Testament, like Micaiah, the prophet Micaiah and Ahab. And what happened to Micaiah? Well, Ahab, and I forget the king of the southern kingdom at the time, who was having conversations about whether you should go into a certain battle. And Ahab says, well, you know, I've got all my prophets here, and they say you should go ahead. He goes, well, do you have anybody else? And Ahab goes, yeah, I got this Micaiah guy, and he doesn't like me. He never gives me good news. And Micaiah comes in and he kind of mocks Ahab. Oh yeah, go ahead, it'll be great, everything will work out. And even Ahab kind of said, you're mocking me. But what happened there were 400 false prophets that were telling Ahab what he wanted to hear. There was one true prophet of God. So I think you can use that as a rule of thumb, that when we run into this situation of a real prophet versus a false prophet, that the 400 false to 1 real is at least the minimum ratio. And it's probably higher. In fact, you could probably make a case that it's 1,000 to 1 or 950 to 1. But, I won't quibble over that. The fact of the matter is we need to be very careful. And what I have seen people prophesying this stuff. Trump's got another term. He's got all these Supreme Court, et cetera. And it's not looking very good right now. I'm going to be honest with you. In fact, it looks worse than I even thought it would. So we're going to play economist roulette here, or slot machine today. So let's just look at a few things that are going on. And then I'm going to have sort of a short thing if my voice still holds out. I will do something from, I think, an important passage of Scripture, but, well, that was 20 minutes of something I didn't plan to do. So I can see the view counts dropping, right, as I don't do it for view counts, by the way. I think I've been very disappointed in people over the past 2 weeks and 3 weeks as I've sat and had time to read more than usual. The church is in a mess. And the warnings of Jesus about nobody being careful that people deceive you are more important than ever, because I see it happening. Look at this. This is an article. Now, this is what's happening with the transition to the new, the transition to the new administration. This is an article by Jason Gay in the Wall Street Journal. In his 1946 essay titled Politics in the English Language, George L. Orwell wrote that political language consists largely of euphemism, question-begging, and sheer cloudy vagueness. The description fits Speaker Nancy Pelosi's new House rules on gender-neutral speech to a T. On Monday, the Democratic-controlled lower chamber voted along party lines to approve new official language guidelines. Words such as himself, herself are to be replaced by themself. Out are father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, and other familiar terms, and in are parent, child, sibling, and so forth. Kevin McCarthy, the Republican minority leader, tweeted that the changes are stupid, which is true, but as Jason Gay says, it's a complete, it's an incomplete assessment. Mrs. Pelosi, he says, is obviously attempting to placate the progressives in her caucus. However, it's also another example of how the political left today demands not only tolerance, but endorsement. You can't disagree respectfully, let alone agree not to agree. It's bad enough when our colleges and universities enforce what amount to speech codes or indulge efforts to shield students from dissenting viewpoints. In fact, there's an open letter that was issued by students at Harvard saying that not only should no Trump administration official ever be offered a faculty position or teaching position at Harvard, they should not even be allowed to walk across campus. And if they have a Harvard degree, those degrees should be revoked. This is the cancel culture. This is what we're going to be facing. And so you see things like a teacher from a school district someplace who went to Washington and participated in the protests is suspended. An attorney for a company fired because he had the audacity to go to Washington to protest. Nobody said a peep about all the protests that we've had since the George Floyd stuff starting in May. 5 miles of Minneapolis are burned to the ground. Have you heard Ilhan Omar, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris? Have you heard any of them say anything about that? And what's his name, Joe Biden? So, I thought this many times over the past couple of weeks. If hypocrisy were water, the world would drown. because that's what we're seeing. And so anyway, so this is the these are some of the examples of the language in clause 4A1B of Rule 10, strike chairman and insert chair. In clause 8C3, strike father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, first cousin, nephew, niece, husband, wife, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, stepfather, stepmother, stepfather, stepdaughter, and insert parent-child sibling, parent sibling, first cousin, siblings. This is, it's insanity. This is, if you want to tie it directly to Bible prophecy, we live in a Romans 1 world. God has given people over to a reprobate mind where they have lost the ability to reason. They have effectively, and I don't want to offend morons when I say this, but they have become morons. It's unbelievable. There's a new book out, The Lead in Big Tech's Battle to Erase the Trump Movement and Steal the Election. This is from the Federalist. And you saw this, every time New York Post brought up Hunter Biden, they were banned from Twitter. Trump was banned from Twitter. Jack Dorsey even sort of came out this week and said, well, maybe we went a little bit too far. It's interesting that in the Uganda elections, Uganda government actually banned Twitter, which led Twitter to complain, how dare you ban us from your country during your election? How dare you? As I said, if hypocrisy were water, the world would drown. But then Dorsey, there's also some from Veritas. There's some audio out there of Dorsey, pretty sure it's Dorsey, the head of Twitter, saying, listen, Trump's just the start. We're going after all of his followers and everything. And you're seeing this, you're in private business, you're seeing these attacks on conservatives that had the audacity to express concerns about the election or to question the results of the election or to want investigation into it. Do you remember Curt Schilling, the pitcher from the Boston Red Sox back in the mid-2000s? The bloody sock guy, remember he pitched and he was bleeding through his sock. He's a conservative businessman. He's had his insurance with AIG. They canceled him this week. And the reason they gave was your social credit score is lacking. So whatever I've said about social credit scores, and I was talking about this a couple years ago, I remember there was a Wired article, and those social credit scores are now being applied in America. Chinese social credit scores are removing people from culture. Now, I don't know the full circumstances. I saw a video of two ladies who were talking about having been on a Delta flight that were talking about having been at the Trump rally, and they removed them from the plane. I saw no indication that they were disruptive. This is what's, and it's interesting. It's like, do these companies not want your business now? I guess not. And so this, in fact, Kimberly Strassel has a great article in Friday's Wall Street Journal, Big Business's Sharp Left Turn, which should not be surprising. Corporate America, she says, took a big step this week, moving from captives of wokeness to active accomplices. The legal and political consequences may prove profound. Big business over the past 4 years has increasingly signed up for leftist politics. Some of this was woke washing, peddling causes or figures for brand benefit, like Nike's Colin Kaepernick commercial or Lacoste replacement of the crocodile logo with endangered species. Some with spinelessness caving into the liberal mob. Think Goldman Sachs' refusal to finance fossil fuel projects. Some was strategic. Twitter and Facebook attempting to ward off regulation with ever-changing policies on misinformation. But the events of last week, the assault on the Capitol and the Democratic Senate takeover, inspired corporate America to take on a new role. Business titans are positioning themselves as arbiters of political speech and activity. And you're going to see this in most places that people work. So so what happened on January 6th at the Capitol was disturbing. It was, but I will tell you this, I've investigated it. I don't know who was causing all the problems. My personal opinion is it was a combination of a number of groups, some more radical patriot groups, probably some Antifa supporters and people in there that wanted to cause chaos and disruption. But what you're seeing is a narrative written to completely change what happened into something else. I think the situation's more complex than they're letting on, and I'm just telling you is they're coming after everybody who was there. With they said they're looking at 144,000 pictures that people that were there at the rally, not even at the Capitol, the rally, had posted. I'm just telling you, and then this scene of whatever it is, 25,000 troops around the Capitol, fences, barricades. They've turned, and I look at this is Washington, a schematic of Washington. You can see the Capitol building, you can see the Lincoln Memorial, Jefferson Memorial, White House, and it's like this. Where do we live? Our capital is now Baghdad. Yeah. A red zone and a green zone. What? This is troubling. Now I've been down to the Capitol building a number of times, and when we were there, there weren't even. It was back in the 90s. We just walked in. I had a friend who was a congressman. I walked over to his office, got on the elevator, went up to his floor, and walked down and walked right in his office. Nobody said a word to me. Well, my friend did. He said, "Hey, it was good to see you." He was a congressman from Arizona at the time. And and it was like, what's happened? The world changed. And so look, even I, who talk about Bible prophecy and rapid change and convergence and acceleration and all of these things, I'll admit to you, it's hard to wrap my head around it, what I'm seeing. We don't live in the same world that we lived in. We talked about early 2020. Seems in the first week of early 2020, I did an update and I said, I'm doing a year in review on 2020 because so much had happened in a few days. That was like January 5th, 2020. And now it's sort of like, it would be great to go back to those days. I don't think we're ever going back to those days. And I don't think anybody in the world is ever going back to those days. So this is, of course, this is a National Geographic 2020. Social Justice Education in America, National Association of Scholars, and a paper about a year ago. Look at the increase in the mention of social justice in educational papers. And so when this thing happened on January 6th, the next day, school districts across the country had memos sent to teachers about how to talk about how children should deal with their feelings of unsafety, that if, because it was white people that stormed the Capitol, we should know that if it was black people that stormed it, they would have all been shot. Even though we've had riots all year, it's the narrative that's going on is crazy. This continues to be a concern. The Russian hacking and other hacking that took place And it's kind of like fallen off everybody's radar. So this is, look, where there's all this concerns about the virus and a mutant virus. Where did it come from? How's it mutated? They even have one that's called the Columbus strain, I think. And it's concerning. I know a number of people who are sick, some quite sick, with this thing. I don't think it's something that you can easily dismiss. And I don't know what the solution is. Although the mayor of Chicago today came out and said, well, we need to... Now, okay, so this is what people said. Things will change when Biden gets in office. So what did she say this morning? We need to open up restaurants and the economy to stop the spread of the virus. I know, and I could hear my sound guys in there going, what? She said, what? And she said, yeah, because restaurants will enforce social distancing, but private parties won't. So too many people are going to private parties, so we got to get them going back to restaurants and bars and stuff. So the whole thing is insane. And then they keep telling you that the vaccine, I don't even know if it's a real vaccine yet, the mRNA thing. But there's concerns about it. I think in Norway they've shut down distributing the vaccine because they had a couple dozen deaths. And then this little chart here on the right, when they looked at the mutant virus in the UK, what they found was very strange for a virus mutating. It had like 17 significant simultaneous mutations. Random. And they're like, this can't happen. It's almost like somebody designed it. So now people are going to, the WHO is even going to Wuhan, China, to try to get to the bottom of it. Good luck with that, WHO. And be sure to stop by the Hong Kong people in jail on your way out. So, well, Middle East. This is sort of a little bit of a review of last year. Just so you know, this is, it's a puzzle piece of the Middle East. You see Saudi Arabia is the big piece here. You see Israel, Gaza, the West Bank here in the foreground in the Mediterranean, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, all that, and then Iran in the upper left-hand corner. The jigsaw puzzle of the Middle East. And so we have this, somebody made this up about the new Iranian flag. And the concerns about Trump. So I'm going to try to piece this together as best I can, because this is what I think is probably the most significant stuff that's going on. So what happened a little over a week ago was there were multiple reports. You can find the videos and some of the open source intelligence people on Twitter, Aurora Intel and In-Game W3 is one that I follow. There were significant Israeli aircraft presence over Beirut. Beirut, by the way, is going into 13 consecutive days of 24-hour curfew to stop the spread of the virus in Lebanon. They have a major problem with it. This is, England is shutting down. Other places are completely shut down. 2021 is not off to a very good start. Let's just put it that way. The transition to 2021 is pretty rocky. So there were all these Israeli strikes in Syria, but they were also, I think what Israel was doing was they were sending a message to people in Lebanon about, by buzzing Beirut, that we can do anything we want whenever we want. that coincided with a lot of anniversary remembrances of Soleimani and the other guy, the head of the Iraqi, the Shia militias in Iraq that were assassinated in Baghdad on January 3rd, 2020, just a year ago. You saw things like there was this very long interview with Nasrallah to Al-Manjar TV. And when I say a long interview, okay, you know, I get grief sometimes because my prophecy update goes an hour and a half. This interview was 3 hours and 48 minutes long. And it was just him sitting there talking by a picture of Soleimani, and he was talking. So he noted that Hezbollah leaders are being targeted not only by the Israeli, and there's some reports that Nasrallah himself has relocated to Iran, but also by the Americans, stressing that targeting Hezbollah leaders is a common Israeli, American, and Saudi goal. He revealed to Al-Mayadeen, based on data, that Saudi Arabia has instigated my assassination for a long time, and at the very least, since the war on Yemen. Our data is that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman raised the issue of my assassination during his visit to Washington, adding that Americans agreed to a Saudi request to assassinate me, that Israel would implement it. And he added, Saudi Arabia has pledged to pay the cost of the war if it takes place. It would result from his assassination. So there were, the newspapers in Iran were filled with these things about interviews with different people marking the first anniversary of martyr Soleimani's assassination. They just articles everywhere. Again, he said that, listen, Iran is eventually going to, this is what Nasrallah said, Iran is eventually going to respond to these assassination attempts, and they're going to deal with it. He said, and Nasrallah described General Soleimani as a humble commander who always visited his friends and aides on the battleground, inquired about what the fighters needed, and was present on the front line. It was just a constant thing. The posters all over Iran about how he was assassinated. Of course, this is the assassination there near the Baghdad airport that took place. That's a sort of a security camera picking it up. And then, of course, that led to these funeral processions all over Iran early in the year. Here's a picture of the vehicle, what's left of it. They weren't able to identify Soleimani because they found a hand with he had a very special ring on it. And also assassinated with him was Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, who was the head of the Iranian-backed Shia militias in Iraq. And so for the last year, there have been threats of retaliation. That has not taken place. This is a memorial that was made up for him in Jerusalem, Lebanon, regarding the assassination of Soleimani. You can see they went into some detail to put this thing together. There were also I think I got this from Khomeini's website. He has a pretty extensive thing, and you see here, this is Soleimani essentially being welcomed by the children. And the interesting thing is, there's all these red flags. See all the red flags? What those are, if you remember back to when he was assassinated, over the dome of the Jamkaran Mosque in Qom, which is the holy city of the Shiites, they raised this red battle flag for the first time in history a year ago. And so now they're publishing this on the website showing Soleimani, and you see the red battle flags again. So this is Iran tipping off where they intend to go with this thing. This is, you see there were billboards all over Iran about Soleimani. A member of parliament in Iran said that he was the architect of expanding the influence. There was a lot of speculation that Trump would do something on his way out of office. There were B-52 flights. There were some aircraft carrier movements in the Persian Gulf. Nothing happened. I didn't think anything was going to happen. Iran will deal with this when they think they have the opportunity. But people are watching Iran and they're understanding what's going on. Even Rouhani got into it, and he made a speech about how we were going to take care of it, and we're going after the people responsible, mainly Trump and Pompeo. We're going to kill them. They're going to be assassinated. And so this is why some of this impeachment stuff, where they want to remove Secret Service protection from Trump when he leaves office, is very troubling. They don't, folks, they don't care. This is about revenge at this point. This is not about, we won, we're moving forward. We won, and we're going to crush you. And we're going to crush your followers. And so, look, this is a picture of, see how this is in one of the Iranian newspapers, how they've, America, Uncle Sam has been ripped apart. Trump is melting down. That type of thing. I'm going to talk about Iran in just a moment real quick. Again, Turkey. We talked a lot about Turkey last year. And, Turkey is trying to get into the good graces of Israel right now. They even did this. I've shared this from Dayan.org, Dayan.org, this paper that they put together. And look, Turkey's like, look how much we can help you develop your gas resources. And, you can easily build your pipeline right up here to Turkey to transit to Europe, and you can sell your gas there. We're doing this because we're such a wonderful neighbor. Now, it's interesting. I did report last year that Turkey had built an extensive network of dams, including a dam that was essentially going to dry up the Euphrates and the Tigris, both of them. They have the ability, and this has a prophetic Bible prophecy applications, because it talks about the Euphrates being dried up. And we often think, well, that would just be a bad drought, right? Well, now we know that there's a geopolitical power, Turkey, that can turn off the water that goes to Iraq. And it's interesting. I quoted an early Turkish leader in the Turkish state after the secular state came in the 1920s, who said, hey, listen, you Arabs, go drink your oil. We have plenty of water in Turkey. Well, now here's what's happening. Turkey is in the midst of a major drought, and the reports from the Turkish engineers that look at this is that Istanbul has 45 days of water left unless it rains. It's a city of 17 million people. And so what you see is these crises that keep popping up everywhere. Whether here, there was in Mongolia a week ago, and I haven't been able to confirm that they were actually able to confirm it, but it appeared that there was in Asia, there was not only the lowest barometric pressure ever recorded on planet Earth, there was also the highest barometric pressure recorded on planet Earth in recorded history, all within like a couple days of each other. There's all this, and I look at this stuff and I'm like, this is really strange. It's birth pangs type stuff. It really is. So Turkey's in the midst of a major drought. The dark areas are areas that lack rain over the last year. And you can see that it's hurting. Seth Ransman has a good article about Turkey, and Turkey wondering if they're going to be able to continue to do what they've done, which they seem to be able to get away with a lot under the Trump administration. And I think it was a black mark on the Trump administration, how Turkey was sort of given free rein in Syria and the Kurdish areas in particular. The international, the INSS has a thing with the strategic assessment that's come out about things like Iranian breakout to nuclear weapons, hike in economic crisis in Israel and rising unemployment, things they need to be prepared for, ongoing coronavirus pandemic, a cyber attack that paralyzes the economy. These are the top 10 things that Israel's facing: military campaign, rising domestic crime due to loss of trust in the government. That sounds very parallel to the United States. A massive natural disaster like an earthquake, flood, or fires, and violence between different groups in Israeli society, and riots and terrorist attacks in the West Bank. I don't know if I should use his name or not. I did talk to Israel David Rubin the other day. He's the former mayor of Shiloh. He's going to be in Ohio in May. Hopefully we'll try to make arrangements to get him here. He and his son were the victims of a very serious terror attack during the Intifada back in 2001. It was a very interesting conversation. Former mayor of Shiloh. So let's see here. Okay. So we had the Abraham Accords. That was another big deal in 2020. This is Mohammed bin Salman. Now, when you got money, you can do stuff like this. You can wall-to-wall carpet the desert, right? And you can sit there with your giant Mac, iMac, I think, and participate in a virtual World Economic Forum meeting. That's what he's doing. Now, there are a couple things. Now, he's trying to build this NEOM thing. There's a video. I'm going to let you look at it. It's a couple minutes long about NEOM. Just watch this. It's kind of creepy, I think.
Cities, born thousands of years ago. They connected us and pushed humanity forward. But they also divided us from nature, from each other, from ourselves. They forgot about people. They forgot about the planet. And we forgot what's important. It's time to remember. It's time for a revolution. It's time to redefine our relationship with nature, to reimagine what a city is without cars and roads, without smog or noise. It's time to rethink communities so that we can connect and create the way we were meant to. It's time. It's time to draw the line. Right here, right there. NEOM.
Now, that's Saudi Arabia, part of the Abraham. They want them to be part of the Abraham Accords. This is a picture of the Arabian Peninsula near the Red Sea entrance. We talked a little bit about that. They want to build a bridge from there over to Egypt. Jordan would be part of this. Of course, Israel has some say because of treaties over what happens to the islands where they want to build the bridge to Egypt. So this is all kind of tied in with this Abraham Accord package. But do you grasp what's going on there with Saudi Arabia? We want to reimagine the city. We want to rebuild this. We want to make a better humanity. And what I'm just telling you is that, the man who will soon be known as the keeper of the two holy mosques is pushing this global 2030 agenda along with everybody else. And he's very good friends with who? Jared Kushner. So I don't know. It's very interesting to watch all of this come together. I think it's significant. I think it's unprecedented. I think the pressure to continue with the Abraham Accords is going to continue and is going to grow because they're going to be, they're concerned about Iran. And all of the Gulf countries that have normalized and those that are on the brink of normalizing are going to come into more normalization agreements with Israel. That's what I think, and I do think it has there are prophetic implications regarding it all over the place. Now there's word that Mohammed bin Salman has essentially cut off Israel right now because he's upset that the information about the meeting he had with Netanyahu was leaked to the public. So he's kind of having a little bit of a hissy fit about it, and that they're not really doing diplomatic things or things in the background. But all of that is going to go away because of the concerns about what's going to be done by the Biden administration. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. This is one of the things, this is an article from the Washington Post. Biden's ambitious LGBT agenda poises him to be the nation's most pro-equality president in history. And this is a quote, I'm trying to remember from Alliance Defending Freedom. Biden has made it clear that he intends to weaponize the law to crush dissent in order to implement a far-left agenda. That impacts not just people of faith, but all Americans who want to live life according to their convictions. The government can't engage in religious bigotry, and there's all sorts of plans. The front page of the New York Times this morning about the agenda that Biden's going to put in the first 10 days to essentially, what's going to happen is it's going to be like Trump never existed. Okay, remember they tore down all the statues. So with Trump, there's never going to be a statue. He's going to be erased from memory. Everything that he implemented and regulations and that type of thing to roll back the abuses of the Obama administration, they're going to go like that. It's particularly now that there are no brakes on these people. This guy continues to exert his influence. Henry Kissinger, he's 97. Reportedly is now 3'8" tall. He just keeps talking though, and he has a lot of influence. Now, one of the things that I have appreciated over the past week was Secretary of State Pompeo didn't quit. He's continued to try to put things in place to continue some of Trump's policies after he leaves. Now, the Democrats say he's just throwing up roadblocks. He's putting barriers in the way to doing what we want to do. Like, yeah, that's not what they did at the end of the Obama administration, right? They never ever did anything like that. They just turned the keys over, right? No, they set landmines all over the place and engaged in a whole bunch of fake investigations to attack election results, but that's another subject. But Pompeo did give a speech, and essentially what he said is, Iran is the home of Al-Qaeda. It's not, and everybody says, well, wait, that's Shia and Sunni, they don't get along. Baloney. They have an agenda as to what they want. They want to get the big Satan, little Satan. Here, just a minute or so of Secretary of State Pompeo's comments at the National Press Club this week.
I want to start with a quick story in these remarks today. Many of you here may recognize the name Abu Muhammad al-Masri, also known as Abdullah Ahmed Abdullah. He was Al-Qaeda's worldwide number 2 and on the FBI's most wanted list for slaughtering members of our State Department family in the Kenya and Tanzania bombings of 1998. More than 200 people, including 12 Americans, lost their lives in those attacks. The New York Times reported in November that al-Masri was shot to death on the streets of Tehran. Today I can confirm for the first time his death on August 7th of last year. The Times wrote, quote, that he had been living in Iran was surprising, given that Iran and Al-Qaeda are bitter enemies, end of quote. It could not be more wrong. It wasn't surprising at all. And more importantly, they're not enemies. Al-Masri's presence inside Iran points to the reason that we're here today. That's what I want to talk about in these remarks. Al-Qaeda has a new home base. It is the Islamic Republic of Iran. As a result, bin Laden's wicked creation is poised to gain strength and capabilities. We ignore this Iran-Al-Qaeda nexus at our own peril. We need to acknowledge it, we must confront it, indeed we must defeat it. Now I know this news will come as a surprise to many Americans. We had Al-Qaeda on the ropes after 9/11 thanks to the sustained efforts of our brave soldiers, intelligence officers, diplomats, NATO allies, many others who worked tirelessly to defend freedom. There are far fewer Al-Qaeda operatives in Afghanistan today than there have been in decades. That remains true. This is an enormous tribute to American resolve, American ingenuity, American leadership, and frankly, raw American military strength. That effort drove Al-Qaeda to search for a safer haven, and they found one. The Islamic Republic of Iran was the perfect choice. Al-Qaeda has in fact carried on a relationship to Iran for nearly 3 decades, as the 9/11 Commission clearly established.
Well, so that was clear. A lot of people are objecting to that. Of course, Tehran, the Iranian government, came out today and said, this is just absolute nonsense. Europe this morning, that it's pretty clear that Iran is now enriching uranium to 20%, which is weapons grade. And there's a lot of concern about what are they going to do with this? Are they going to implement a nuclear program? Are they going to get 1 bomb? Are they going to try to get 5? They're trying to get 10. They're also developing their missile technology. You also saw North Korea come out with another new missile that can easily reach the U.S. this week. They're saber rattling again. All this is because of the transition that's taking place. And they're trying to establish negotiating positions because of what they think they may get out of the Biden administration. And so another thing that the Pompeo is doing is designating the Houthis in Yemen as a terror organization. You should also know that there are a significant number of drones, stealth drones, and what they call suicide drones, so manufactured by Iran, that are now existent in northeastern Yemen, that are in range of Israel and Saudi Arabia. Again, there's all this posturing for this conflict and war that Iran is trying to establish negotiating positions. Now, I don't know whether they're going to do anything, but Israel has pretty much said, okay, we've had it. We have had it. And so this week, what happened was in northern Israel, up here in Syria. So see here in Syria, the Euphrates River here that comes down, Dar el-Zor, al-Raqqa was up in this area. Israel engaged in the biggest number of airstrikes they've done against Syria ever. There are some reports that, in fact, I have a video of some of the things that took place. This comes from a website called Southfront, and it pieces together different Syrian things, and you can see where these things took place in eastern Syria. They're near the border crossing with Iraq. There were the accounts that I've seen is that 57 people were killed. Iranian different commanders, including one of their senior commanders of one of their Shia militias. And there were even reports that after this, the attack was so severe that the militias there raised the Syrian flag afterwards. They got rid of the Iranian battle flag and they raised the Syrian regime flag. And so what Israel's trying to do is they're trying to drive a wedge between the Shia militias and the Sunni or the Syrian army people that Iran is using in its campaigns, and drive a wedge between them in Syria and Russia. So it's very... Now, Israel hasn't taken credit for the strikes, but it's pretty clear that it was Israel, and it was based on intelligence that they received from American bases in the area. So it was, like I said, the most significant airstrikes of the entire Syrian war. Jonathan Spire has a good article in the Jewish Chronicle in the UK talking about how, Iran has these brutal militias. They're standing by. Now, listen, all of this is taking place in northern Syria, and it's also happening in an area that's hundreds of miles away from, 400 or 500 miles away from Israel. So that's why, well, I think it's significant, and I think it shows sort of the alliance of the Ezekiel 38 nations and that type of thing. It's not on the borders of Israel. There are some militias along the Golan Heights and in southeastern Syria that Iran is funding, but it's still not a significant troop presence or anything like that. And so it's very unstable right at the moment. Let me just play you, this is a clip from, I'll go back to my update from the end of January last year. Jonathan Spire and Jennifer Carafella spoke at the INSS conference, and I think that would be the last Sunday in January of last year that I played clips of their talk about what's going to happen in Syria. And here we are a year later, and all this stuff is still going on. So let me finish with this. This is an article by Caroline Glick called Israel Goes Back to the Future. It's in Israel Hayom newspaper on Friday. You can get it at carolineglick.com. In an interview with the New York Times last month, President-elect Joe Biden restated his intention to return to the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. Israel opposes this plan because the 2015 deal ensures Iran will become a nuclear-armed state. Media reports over the past few weeks have detailed some of Israel's plans to convince the incoming administration to reconsider its position. Among them, the government intends to use documents from Iran's nuclear archive that Mossad agents spirited out of Tehran. They brought out the fact that this al-Qaeda leader was assassinated in Tehran back in August. They've also engaged in these, over the past week, these massive strikes. You probably even haven't heard that much about them because the media here is focused on completely different things. But again, these are the most significant airstrikes that Israel has made, as my understanding is Israel has made during the Syrian civil war. Now, part of the reason that Israel's doing that is if Iran is trying to establish its negotiating posture because of the incoming Biden administration, Israel's also trying to establish its negotiating posture in light of the incoming Biden administration. And really what's happening vis-a-vis Israel and the Biden administration, I will only ever be able to call it the Biden administration at this point, but what's happening is that Israel is very concerned about these people that are coming into the Biden administration. Why is that? And Caroline details it in his article. First of all, the guy on the left is named William Burns. He is the designate head the CIA. On the right is a guy named Jake Sullivan, who the Biden has said will be his national security advisor. And these guys are going to get approved now because there's no Republican opposition. Well, they could probably filibuster a few of these guys. But these guys, you need to understand who they were. They were the architects of the American JCPOA, that agreement, that ridiculous agreement that the Obama administration entered into with Iran. These guys were some of the lead negotiators on that. Now they're going to head National Security Agency and the CIA. How do you think this is going to go for Israel? Okay, this is, I think, incredibly significant. Burns, Caroline notes, was a reasonable choice to lead secret talks with Iran because he had a long track record of treating Iran well and Israel poorly. During George W. Bush's administration, Burns served as Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs. According to officials who worked with him in that position, Burns advocated against sanctioning Syria and Iran. He undermined the sanctions against Yemen, and he also tried to prevent Israel's development of the Aero missile defense system by claiming falsely that it violated the missile technology control regime. Then there are the Palestinians. In September 2000, the Palestinians launched a massive terror onslaught against Israel, which lasted for 4 years. Every day, Israelis were subject to acts of murderous terrorism that ranged from roadside stoning, shootings, and bombs. And as I said, I talked to a gentleman this week for over an hour who had gone through this with his son on the road back from Jerusalem to Shiloh. It was a miracle that they survived. The Palestinians launched their terror war after rejecting Israel's offer of peace and statehood at Camp David and Peace Summit in July 2000. Yet in 2001, Burns, appears to be headed to be the new CIA director, Burns was instrumental in convincing then President Bush to become the first president to support Palestinian statehood. Burns' support for the Palestinians is widely shared among members of Biden's incoming team. You might remember this lady, who was also one of the main negotiators of the JCPOA deal. This is Wendy Sherman. She has been nominated or stated that she will become Deputy Secretary of State. It gets worse. If you remember Christmas Day 2016, the Obama administration refused to veto at the Security Council Resolution 2334, which is a sea change in the way the United States and Israel's relationship went. Heretofore, the U.S. had consistently stood with Israel. Now, this time, they didn't vote again in favor of the resolution. They just refused to veto it. And the person who was behind that was, guess who? Samantha Powers. She is now supposed to head up the USAID in the Biden administration. So she played a significant role in that. And Biden also intends to appoint Dan Shapiro to oversee the Abraham Accords. The sources raised this concern that Biden's goal in making the appointment is to restore the Palestinian veto over the normalization of relations between Israel and Arab states. Shapiro, who took the unprecedented step of remaining in Israel and active in public affairs after he left office, is expected to remain in Israel to take on this function. So, you go from Jared Kushner to Dan Shapiro. It's not advancing the ball. The Europeans, the quartet, had a big meeting in Cairo, and they said that we need to go back to the two-state solution. So you need to know that all of this is going on. So Israel's doing the airstrikes, Iran's putting things in place, and Israel's concern is with the people in the Biden administration and what they're going to do. And Israel's government has collapsed, and they have a caretaker government right now, and they will be in elections in mid-March. It's almost like national torture, I think. So this was a report in Israel Hayom the other day. Sheldon Adelson an Israeli casino magnate, billionaire. He passed away. Big supporter of the state of Israel and also Republican Party here in the United States. But he, what was reported was that the concerns are great enough about the development of the Iranian nuclear program. Here's a clip from an Iranian video about their missile and technology development, that the head of the Israeli Defense Force has requested essentially plans to be drawn up, one of which would include direct attacks on the Iranian nuclear facilities. So everything is very tense. Everything is in turmoil. Our transition in the United States government, as you may have noticed, is not going all that well. And Israel's facing elections. Lebanon is in meltdown from the coronavirus and political problems. There's tensions in Saudi Arabia. It's everywhere you look. There's Qatar has kind of started to come back on board, but they're not going to do anything. So in light of this, the United States has always divided up the world into different spheres of influence and intelligence cooperation with countries. And so the Middle East, as always, is CENTCOM. CENTCOM has included all the Arab states and the Central Asian Muslim states, Kazakhstan, the Stan republics. Israel's never been in CENTCOM, but there are a number of articles this week that in a very significant move, Trump has placed Israel in CENTCOM. That's recognition of the fact that these normalization agreements between Israel and the Arab states have led to some pretty good cooperation. And so this is a move that everybody would describe that's aware of the situation. This has never happened. It's unprecedented that Israel would be brought in to this group at this time. It would not have happened without the Abraham Accords. So there's Seth Fransman has a great article, Regional Concerns for Israel's Inclusion in CENTCOM. You can read that. It's in today's Jerusalem Post. Very, very significant. And here's the last thing that I'll finish with. Palestinians, Jordan, saying Israel Judaizes the Western Wall. So here we have all this stuff going on, and the mythology still continues that somehow Israel has no rights in Jerusalem at the Temple Mount. There were reports this week that there were people from Israel, soldiers or whatever, up on the Temple Mount taking measurements, scientific measurements. Don't know exactly what was going on, but it's clear they have plans. And at the same time, you have Israel fighting them, Jordan and the Palestinians, like, you have no right to this. You're trying to wipe out. It's the Western Wall of Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's not the Western Wall of the Temple Mount. So you have all these archaeological discoveries that have happened over the last few years that confirm Israel's historical presence there. The processional road, the little seals that have been discovered. One of the head of the Al-Aqsa Mosque said this: what was happening at the Western Wall Plaza in the context of Israel's attempt to create a false Jewish identity. This is an unacceptable change of the reality, he added. It contradicts international laws. Jordan called on Israel to immediately stop the ongoing excavations and abide by its obligations as an occupying power in occupied East Jerusalem, and to stop violating or changing the identity of the old city. As I said, if hypocrisy was water, the world would drown. Let me just leave you with this thought. Listen, folks, we are entering a time that is it's going to be very difficult. I do think that there is persecution coming. I think that we need to stand for truth. We need to be very careful about what we share and talk about. Let me just share this. In Acts chapter 17, the Apostle Paul went to the Areopagus. He was in Athens, verse 16. This is an example of what we should do, I think. Now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and the Stoics encountered him, and some said unto him, What will this babbler say? Others some, He seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him into the Areopagus, saying, May we know what this new doctrine there whereof thou speakest is? For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears, we would know therefore what these things mean. For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. They were more open than the modern university, obviously. Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, Ye men of Athens, I perceive that in all things ye are too superstitious. It's exactly not a seeker-sensitive type message. I think this is one of the most misinterpreted and misapplied passages in the modern evangelical church. For as I passed by, Paul says, and behold your devotions, I found an altar with this description, to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him I declare unto you. God made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is the Lord of heaven and earth, and dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Neither is worship with men's hands as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things, and had made of one blood all nations of men, for to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him, and find him, though he not be far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. And as certain of your own poets have said, we are also his offspring. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone graven by art and man's device. And then he says this, and this is the boldness that I think the Lord would require of us in today's day and age, a day of deception. And the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent, because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, and that he hath raised him from the dead. And when they had heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, and others said, We will hear thee again on this matter. So Paul departed from among them. However, certain man clave unto him, and believed, among which was Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Paul didn't shy away from speaking the truth about Jesus Christ. And if there's anything we need to be doing more than anything else at this time, it's exactly that. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much. Pray that you will bless us this week and give us boldness to speak truth in a culture full of deception. In Jesus' name, amen.